That's just as you play the game. That's the timer. But it's also...
So you're timed?
Yeah, this is a real-time game.
What are these?
You're not only timed, but also...
What am I timed to doing in this game? Yeah.
There are, like, enemies invading, and you're shooting lasers, and it's a team group. And there are threats coming in, and you have to charge up the lasers and the shields.
That's a great example. The music that you were just playing from Space Alert of what we'll talk about today, right? Which is the magic circle.
Right, the magic circle. So the magic circle is this idea that when you start playing a game, you step into a somewhat imaginary world. The challenge then is how to create a little bit of world, but also how to bring people in. And so when we're doing our exercise and our activities in class, we often don't think enough about how do we bring our students to get kind of immersed in the world that we're creating, and how do we keep them. So like any other form of fiction, bringing people into the magic circle requires a little bit of willing suspense of disbelief.
So the design principle of the magic circle sounds like it's both about having sort of the alluring visuals and potentially a soundtrack, but also is about the rules, right? Which I think the willing suspension of disbelief sounds like a perfect phrase for this.
Right.
So there's the elements that just make you believe that you're in a place, and it has its own rules. It has its own visual landscape and audio landscape.
That's right. It's an idea. It's just about recreating the space in your classroom, on your tabletop, and putting some time and effort into thinking about how do we convey this experience. Do we put some music on? So if you're doing an activity or an exercise about elections, or if you're doing it about the UN, or if you're doing it about other cases, it makes a lot of sense to put some time and effort in recreating this environment and kind of encouraging your students to actually believe that they are embodying these roles, that they are in the situation, of course, within reasonable means. But I think playing soundtracks is something we don't do enough. So we often give our students time to do some exercise. We say, go, you have 5 minutes to do this, and then we just stand there quietly, while YouTube today has a ton of great background musics that could support a lot of stuff, especially if it's a kind of activity that is timed. So another thing that's great about Space Alert's soundtrack, that Space Alert's soundtrack is timed. So you don't need a timer. So you tell students you have 10 minutes to do this. When the music is over, your time is up. And there's a lot of game shows and other setups to use this, but we don't. And so we always mess up the management of time in our classroom, myself included. Here preaching from some position of higher moral ground. It's just those tools are very useful. So that's one thing. It times the activity. It also provides, specifically Space Alert, because it's designed, this is more high cost investment, but it's designed for the game. It provides useful interjections. So the music changes in higher intensity, and the recording tells the players what to do at specific times. So you don't have to go all out on that. But it's just kind of an example of how the visuals, the music, the setup, the way you arrange your classroom, where the seats are, where the tables are part of bringing people into this unique experience that you're creating for them.
Right. This reminds me of an assignment that we tested recently here at the Learning Lab. And it was called the Spaghetti Challenge, right? You have a few pieces of dry spaghetti, some marshmallows, some tape, some string, pretty bare bones materials, right? But one of the Learning Lab fellows designed a playlist. So this playlist would play as each group was attempting to build as tall of a spaghetti tower as they could.
Yeah.
Right? But by the end, the music really picks up the tempo, and you're sort of rushing to try to figure out, right? You feel more in this space of like, oh yeah, of course I have to finish it now. So it definitely makes sense that a soundtrack could affect a classroom or an assignment, an in-class activity in this way.
Yeah, and a lot of simulations that I've done in the past, you kind of force students to refer to each other as Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, or the Right and Honorable so and so. I mean, when you do moot court, you have people dress up. And the reason you do this is because, actually that changes how you feel in the moment. It's much harder to argue in front of a court when they're sitting actually above you and they're all dressed up. So if you want to practice actually doing this thing, and again, if you want to practice ethical decision making under conditions of stress, you sometimes want to have a stressful soundtrack that pushes people to think about that.
Do you have anything that you could say for people that are teaching ethics and thinking about how they might use engaging visuals or audio?
So specifically for teaching ethics, one of the challenges have been, as I've said, is creating unique environment where people are actually making decisions. So instead of just asking people to think about difficult problems, it's also placing them in the situation. So engaging visuals, they could be just images on a PowerPoint, or they can be a soundtrack while students are working in groups, or they could be things that you print out and divide. They can be forcing the students to wear suits, or to wear whatever, to wear a uniform, or to wear, just make them feel like using some props and using some sounds could really enhance the experience of situated learning, of placing students in the positions where they're making decisions. Of course, they're not substitutes for actual materials, but they're another way in which we can enhance situated learning.